Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Royer, and in this edition, we're going to take a look at the case of Iwao Hakamata, who was sentenced to death for murders he did not commit and spent nearly half a century on death row. We'll speak with his older sister, Hideko, who has fought tirelessly to get him free. It was in 1966 in the Japanese city of Shimizu that an executive of a local miso manufacturer, his wife and their two teenage children were found murdered and their house set on fire. Police soon arrested Iwao Hakamata, one of the employees, on suspicion he killed them for money. He was sentenced to death despite claiming his innocence throughout the trial. A decades-long legal battle ensued, and last month he was finally acquitted of murder, 58 years after his arrest, and prosecutors have now decided not to appeal against that ruling. Well, I'm joined on set by France 24's Charli James. Hi, Charli.
Hello, Yuka.
So, Charli, could you give us an outline of this case?
Sure. Well, like you said, it was way back in 1966 that Hakamata was arrested for murder. Now, he denied it, but says he confessed after brutal police interrogations lasting 12 hours or longer that included beatings. Now, based on his forced confession and blood-stained clothes, police claimed that they found a year after his arrest, Hakamata was sentenced to death in 1968. After that, for decades, Hakamata's lawyers worked to gather evidence to prove his innocence and filed 2 motions for a retrial. It wasn't until 2014 that a retrial was ordered. Why, after all these years? Well, the judge who granted a retrial acknowledged that the clothes that police found were not actually Hakamata's and that the blood that was on them was planted. So Hakamata was released from prison on bail pending the retrial. However, he was still considered guilty. It took another 9 years for the retrial to actually happen. And last month, he was declared innocent after 46 years on death row. And like you said, it was just this week that prosecutors said they would not appeal the verdict. And while they apologized for how long it took for the retrial to start, they also said that they don't accept the decision that he is innocent.
On behalf of the police in charge of the investigation at the time, I am sorry that Mr. Hakamata was in legal limbo for so long.
Mr. Hakamata is in fragile mental health after spending 46 years on death row. It was his 91-year-old sister, Hideko, who fought to clear his name. She joins me from Hamamatsu in Japan. Hideko-san, thank you for joining us. Now, nearly 6 decades after his arrest, your brother was finally acquitted. How do you feel now?
I am very, very happy. The moment I heard the judge say the defendant is innocent, tears came pouring out. I'm not a person who cries easily, but I was so happy.
And how is Iwao-san? How did he react to the news?
He lives in his own imaginary world. I hesitated about whether to tell him the news. When I went home in the early evening of September 26th and said to him, "You've been declared innocent," he remained silent. He didn't utter any words, but I felt that the expression on his face softened a little. He might have understood a little of what happened, but not completely.
Now, you've dedicated almost your entire life to this legal battle. How do you look back on all these years?
Well, right now, I just feel so happy that it's like those 58 years have just blown away. I really don't feel the sadness or the pain looking back at that time.
Now, the prosecution and the police, while apologizing for the time it took for a retrial to take place, refused to acknowledge your brother's innocence or accept the ruling that the evidence against him was fabricated. What do you have to say to them and to the Japanese state?
I personally think they said what they had to say in their position, whatever they really felt at the bottom of their hearts. The comments from the prosecutor general, well, I don't think they came from her heart, but from her official standpoint.
Are you angry? Do you want to sue the country?
At the moment, I don't feel angry. It happened 58 years ago. Most of the police officers and investigators who worked on the case are no longer around. We don't know whom to direct our anger at. So, at the moment, I'm not holding any grudges.
Hakamata was the world's longest-serving death row inmate. In the time he was in prison, more than 85 nations abolished the death penalty. Charlie, why has Japan kept it?
Right. So currently, Japan and the United States are the only two economically advanced nations in the world that still execute people. In Japan, inmates are hung to death, and they're not told that they're going to be executed until just a few hours before. So this means that every day Hakamata was waking up in solitary confinement, unsure if this would be his last day on Earth. And that took an enormous toll on his mental health. Now, Japanese politicians point to overwhelming public support as justification for keeping the death penalty. According to a government survey, 80% of the Japanese public supports it. The thing about that survey is it's not very nuanced. It only asks if the death penalty should exist or should not. It does not ask how strongly people feel about the issue or about other punishment options, such as life in prison without parole. So it may not accurately reflect the range of people's feelings. Officials will also point to the extremely low rate of violent crime in Japan, but there's no proven link between the death penalty and saying it deters violent crime. And finally, the death penalty just isn't really a big issue on the radar of the Japanese public. The lack of a public campaign to stop it means that it's unlikely to go away anytime soon.
And Japan has an extremely high criminal conviction rate, doesn't it? Why is that?
Right. So in most democracies, people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Now, this is also stated in Japan's constitution, but the principle and how the reality of how it's practiced don't always match up there. Japanese investigators rely heavily on confessions. It's been called a hostage justice system because suspects who deny accusations against them are often kept in detention for a very long time, while those who admit to wrongdoing are more easily released on bail. In the past, this has created conditions for forced confessions, like in Hakamata's case. Prosecutors also will only pursue cases that they are sure they can win. So this leads to an extremely high conviction case of over 99%. And once that conviction is confirmed, it's nearly impossible to get a retrial due to the extremely high legal bar.
Well, indeed, Charlie, in Japan it's often said that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a man to get a retrial. Hideko-san, what do you have to say about this?
I think the problem lies with the police not revealing all the evidence that they have. In our case, we only succeeded in getting a retrial once a new piece of evidence came out. I strongly feel it's wrong for investigators to hold back any evidence. Whether that evidence is favorable or negative, if they want to seek the truth, they should release all pieces of evidence that they have in their possession in a fair manner.
Now, we now know that your brother was wrongfully convicted to death. The death penalty has been, meanwhile, abolished in almost all countries here in Europe, including France. What are your thoughts on capital punishment?
Before this case, when I was younger, the death penalty system was already there, and I, quite irresponsibly, just took it for granted. I thought it was normal to have the system in place, and I asked no questions. It was only after what happened to Iwao that I started feeling that something was wrong with that system. Now, I feel it's wrong for a person to kill another person, even if they have the legal power to do so. So yes, I am against capital punishment.
And what impact do you think your brother's case will have on the future of the Japanese justice system and perhaps beyond?
I think we just have to keep on fighting so that there are no more victims of wrongful convictions and that the death penalty is abolished. I don't think we can bring drastic changes to Japan anytime soon, but cases of false accusations have been repeated so many times. I think ordinary citizens, too, must think of the problem as their own and join in this action.
So even though your brother's case is now closed, you're going to continue to fight for a more just and fair justice system, are you?
Yes. Fortunately, I'm in good shape. We can't be satisfied just because Iwao has been saved. So many people are suffering as a result of being accused of a crime they didn't commit. There are others who've been fighting for 60 years to clear their names. We want to keep fighting for them to win their right to retrials as well.
You said that Iwao-san lives in his own imaginary world. What are your hopes for him for the rest of his life?
Given his old age, I don't ask for a lot. I just want him to live a normal, peaceful life, and hopefully for as long as possible. Just living a quiet life is all we ask for.
Hideko Hakamata, thank you very much for speaking to France 24, and congratulations again for your brother. And that's it for this edition of Access Asia. Remember, you can watch this and all our previous episodes on our website, france24.com, or listen to them on your favorite podcast platform. See you next time.